Today we need to talk about the massive red hat wearing elephant in the room. Nintendo is panicking. When I say panicking, I don't mean someone spilled coffee on the server hosting the Smash Brothers netcode, because let's be honest, those servers have been running on a single AA battery and a potato since 2018. I mean full-blown boardroom sweating emergency meeting panicking. Word on the street is that production for the Nintendo Switch 2 is getting slashed, not by 5%, not by 10%. We're looking at a 33% production cut starting next month. 1/3 of the manufacturing line is just getting unplugged because the sales are, to put it mildly, absolutely brutal. Now, if you've been paying attention to the gaming space over the last couple of years, you know that the hype for the Switch 2 is practically astronomical. We spent over half a decade begging Nintendo for a console that could run a Zelda game at a frame rate higher than a PowerPoint presentation. We wanted stable 1080p, we wanted better Joy-Cons that wouldn't start drifting before we even took them out of the box, and we wanted the battery life to outlast a single sitting on the toilet. And for a hot second, it felt like Nintendo was going to deliver the holy grail of handheld gaming. But here we are. The honeymoon phase is entirely over, the divorce papers are being drafted, and Nintendo is sitting in an empty house wondering where all the buyers went. A 33% cut in hardware production within the first major life cycle window of a brand new console is catastrophic. From a purely marketing and business standpoint, this is the equivalent of a Hollywood blockbuster pulling its theatrical run after the opening weekend. When a massive corporation like Nintendo tells its supply chain to pump the brakes by a whole third, it means their warehouses are getting backed up. The consoles are sitting on store shelves, collecting dust right next to the forgotten copies of Balan Wonderworld and those weird third-party controllers that your little brother is forced to use when he comes over. So how did we get here? How does the successor to one of the best-selling consoles in human history manage to drop the ball so hard that factories are literally shutting down lines? First off, let's talk about market saturation and the fundamental flaw in Nintendo's marketing strategy for this generation. The original Switch sold well over 140 million units. Everybody and their grandma owns one. You have one, I have one, my neighbor's dog probably has one buried in the backyard. When you have a massive install base like that, convincing those people to shell out hundreds of dollars for a new piece of plastic that does roughly the exact same thing is a very, very tough sell. It's the smartphone dilemma. Why upgrade to the newest flagship phone when your current one still scrolls through TikTok just fine? Why upgrade to a Switch 2 when your original Switch still plays Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Because let's be real, we're probably going to be playing Mario Kart 8 until the heat death of the universe. Nintendo banked entirely on the idea that slapping a 2 on the box and beefing up the internal specs would be enough to trigger a mass migration, but they severely overestimated the casual market's desire for an upgrade. The hardcore gamers, the people watching this video, sure, we care about anti-aliasing and better load times, but the dad buying a console for a 6-year-old, he doesn't care about upscaling technology. He cares that the new console costs a small fortune and the old one is currently sitting on the shelf for a fraction of the price. And that leads perfectly into the second fatal flaw, the game library. You cannot launch a next generation console without a nuclear payload of system selling exclusive titles. This is gaming industry 101. When the original Switch launched, it had Breath of the Wild. That game single-handedly carried the console on its back for the first year. People were buying the Switch just to play Zelda, and the console essentially functioned as a $400 Zelda machine. What did the Switch 2 bring to the table? A couple of shiny tech demos, a handful of ports that look slightly less blurry, and a promise that the big games are totally definitely coming someday. Please trust us, bro. Cannot ask consumers in today's economy to invest in a promise. Groceries are expensive, rent is absurd, and people are tightening their belts. When disposable income shrinks, entertainment purchases are the first things put on the chopping block. If a gamer is going to drop serious cash on a new system, that system needs to offer an experience they absolutely cannot get anywhere else. Instead, we got a launch lineup that felt like an appetizer sampler at a mid-tier chain restaurant. Sure, it tastes fine, but nobody is writing home about the mozzarella sticks. So let's look at this through a marketing lens for a second, because Nintendo's messaging has been incredibly muddy. When you're following up a legendary success, your branding needs to be razor sharp. You need to clearly communicate exactly why the old thing is obsolete and why the new thing is essential. Think about the transition from the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64. That was a massive, undeniable leap. You went from 2D sprites to full 3D environments. Nobody had to explain to a consumer why they needed an N64. They just looked at Super Mario 64 and their minds were blown. With the Switch 2, Nintendo has essentially released the iterative upgrade that everyone was asking for 5 years ago, but they're trying to market it as a full-blown generational leap. It's confusing, and when consumers get confused, they do not open their wallets, they close them and wait to see what happens. This is giving me massive, terrifying flashbacks to the Wii U era, if you can remember it. For those of you who might have wiped the Wii U from your memory banks, allow me to re-traumatize you. The Wii was an absolute juggernaut. It was in nursing homes, it was in frat houses, it printed money. Then Nintendo released the Wii U, a console with a terrible name, confusing marketing, and a massive tablet controller that nobody asked for. People thought it was just an add-on for the original Wii. The sales absolutely tanked, third-party developers abandoned ship faster than rats on a sinking galleon, and Nintendo spent years trying to put out the fire before finally putting the console out of its misery and rushing the original Switch to market. Now, I'm not saying the Switch 2 is entirely the next Wii U. The Switch 2 is fundamentally a better piece of hardware. It's sleek, it has potential, and it fixes a lot of the hardware gripes we had with the original. But the market trajectory is looking frighteningly similar. Sluggish sales, consumer apathy, and now massive production cuts. If third-party developers look at these anemic sales numbers and decide it's not worth the financial risk to port their big AAA games to the Switch 2, we're going to see a devastating snowball effect. No third-party games means fewer reasons to buy the console. Fewer consoles sold means even less third-party support. It is a death spiral that is incredibly difficult to pull up from once you cross the event horizon. So what's the play here? How does Nintendo fix the disaster class in the modern hardware launches? Well, they have two main levers they can pull, and they need to pull them hard and fast. First, the price. It has to come down. I know Nintendo hates lowering prices more than they hate fan-made Pokemon games, but desperation breeds necessity. 33% production cut means they are bleeding money on inventory storage and lost momentum. They need an aggressive, undeniable price drop, or at the very least, a massive bundle deal that includes a top-tier game. Make it an offer that parents and gamers literally cannot refuse. Eat the cost on the hardware to get the install base up, because right now, nobody wants to pay premium prices for an iterative upgrade. Second, they need to drop a Megaton game announcement, and they need to do it yesterday. I am talking about the kind of game announcement that breaks the internet, a new groundbreaking 3D Mario game that redefines platforming, but actually showing gameplay that proves it needs the power of the Switch 2. A brand new Super Smash Bros. That makes the competitive scene lose their collective minds. They cannot afford to trickle out remasters and spin-offs anymore. The big guns need to come out, and they need to be exclusive to the new hardware. No more cross-gen releases. You have to force the hand of the consumer. Tell them if you want to play the game of the decade, you have to buy the box. It's honestly wild to see Nintendo in this position again. I mean, just a few years ago, they were untouchable. They were riding high on the Animal Crossing pandemic wave, breaking sales records, and laughing their way to the bank. Just goes to show how quickly the landscape of the gaming industry can shift. You can go from the undisputed king of the hill to desperately slashing production numbers in the blink of an eye if you misread the room. For us gamers, though, this is actually kind of a win in disguise. When mega corporations get comfortable, they get lazy. They charge us $60 or $70 for bare bones ports, they hold back on major innovations, and they nickel and dime us on online subscriptions that barely function. But a panicked Nintendo, a Nintendo backed into a corner with their backs against the wall, that is the Nintendo that gives us masterpieces. That is the Nintendo that takes wild, creative risks to win us back. So while the executives in Kyoto might be having a collective heart attack over these 33% production cuts, I'm sitting here rubbing my hands together. I want to see them fight for our money again. I want to see them sweat, because the harder they have to work to sell this console, the better the games are going to be for us. We will have to see how the next few months play out, if these production cuts are a temporary speed bump or the first sign of a catastrophic collapse. Only time, of course, will tell, but you can bet I will be right here watching the entire glorious train wreck unfold. But what do you guys think? Are you holding off on the Switch 2? Are you still happily playing your original Switch? Or did you buy the new one and deeply regret it? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let's get a discussion going. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the business side of gaming, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out as we keep growing. As always, thank you so much for hanging out, and I will catch you all in the next video. Keep gaming, stay sharp, and take care. Peace.